and Matthew Caruana Galizia, investigative journalist and son of the murdered Maltese journalist Daphne Caruana Galizia. Just recently, 19 lawsuits were dropped, but still a number of lawsuits are remaining to fight, and it means a daily fight for you. How are you? How are you coping?
Hi, thank you for that introduction. I should be completely honest, which is that it's extremely difficult. I had to suspend my life and my life plans, as did every other member of my family, to continue the fight for justice in Malta. And we wouldn't have been able to get as far as we've been able to get without the support of international organizations like FPU. So to start with the libel cases, in the years leading up to my mother's murder, there were many attempts to shut her up using or abusing legal tools. So politicians would file multiple libel suits against my mother. Their associates in business, corrupt associates, would also file libel suits against my mother. And it became clear to us that all of these people in government, their associates in business, were acting in concert. It was a witch hunt, and it was designed to shut my mother up, to get her into a position where she would say, it's not worth it, I'm giving up, time to retire. Of course, they misjudged my mother's personality and didn't realize that she would never give up, and the more people attempted to bully her, the more she would fight back. So when those attempts didn't succeed, the people whom my mother was reporting on resorted to murder. Under Malta's legislation, those libel cases, which were filed against my mother, between 40 and 50 of them, around 46 if I remember well, were inherited by my family. So there were a number of criminal defamation cases which dropped upon my mother's death, but the remaining 46 civil defamation cases were inherited by my family. Of course, we had to continue fighting these, or we would lose by default, which meant that we would have lost everything. Our homes, our income, and absolutely everything we own. Because if you add up all of the libel cases, the maximum amount of damages would have outstripped everything that my family owns. So apart from wanting to defend my mother's legacy and defend my mother's work, there was a real threat to our well-being. We would have been unable to continue fighting these cases because there's a massive cost involved in fighting them. All of the work that has to be put in by us, the defendants, into research, finding out the people whom my mother was working with, making contact with her sources, preparing the defense, paying the lawyers that are going to be arguing the cases. While my mother's assassination might have been a surprise to a lot of people in Europe, it wasn't so much of a surprise to us. It was a massive shock, but we could see the way things were going in Malta. My mother was a journalist for 30 years. Over those 30 years, the situation got worse and worse instead of better and better. After EU membership, Malta was flooded with a huge amount of investment and funding without the tools that it needed in order to be able to make sure that there was no corruption in that disbursement of funding, that it was able to fight organized crime, that increased investment brings with it, and so on. And for 4 years, I worked at an organization called ICIJ. I worked on big international investigations like Luxembourg leaks, Swiss leaks, the Panama Papers, Paradise Papers. So a lot of those investigations had links to Malta. And over again, I could see that my mother was bringing out new information, that the organization I worked for was bringing out new information about organized crime in Malta, about high-level corruption in Malta. And again, nothing was happening. Nothing was being done. Investigations were being stalled. There were never any prosecutions. There was zero enforcement. So a large part of our work has been, of my family's work, has been fighting for international bodies like the Council of Europe's Manival, Greco, to step in and make sure that there is enforcement in Malta. Of course, a huge amount of work is done by European diplomats behind the scenes, by Dutch diplomats, German diplomats, Italian diplomats, and so on, whichever country they come from, to make sure that these international bodies are stepping up, to make sure that Malta complies with its international obligations. Because ultimately, if there is high-level corruption in Malta, Malta is a part of the European Union, it becomes a backdoor for dirty money, for corrupt money and corrupt influence to enter the European Union and start influencing politics in the Netherlands and other more powerful EU member states. It becomes a problem for the whole European Union. And we have seen this with the influence that Azerbaijan has had first in Malta and then in the rest of the European Union. The third thing that I really want to stress is that, as in my mother's case, the primary cause, if we look at the statistics compiled by the Committee to Protect Journalists, the primary cause for the murder of journalists is corruption. So the majority of journalists who are murdered while doing their work or murdered for doing their work is not war reporting, although that is a big issue itself, but it is reporting on politics and on corruption. So one of the things that we really have to do to make sure that journalists are able to do their work safely is ensure that there is enforcement when it comes to laws that criminalize corruption and bribery. And even in the European Union, this is a huge issue, inadequate enforcement. The European Union simply lacks the tools to make sure that there is adequate enforcement. We have to continue developing authorities like the EPPO, like the European Banking Authority, to make sure that the European Union is properly equipped to fight corruption, organized crime, and money laundering, even looking at Europol. And the case in Malta, I believe, is the best example, let's say, in the European Union, because it has all of the worst possible things that can happen when the state is completely captured by corrupt interests and organized crime.
Thank you so much, Matthew. This is absolutely true, and I underline everything you say. I wish you all the best in your personal fight, and you know we are here to help you.